Welcome to the next podcast, which is podcast 4 in Civility Speaks with me, Robert Sachs. The working definition of civility in my book, The Path of Civility, is civility is rooted in an altruistic spirit founded on an understanding that we are basically good and that we best grow and succeed through cooperation. Thus, civility as a concept is social. What would be the point of being civil unless it was in relation to another? Spiritual literature will tell us that we need to be more kind and caring and loving to ourselves. Yet no spiritual teaching says that we should be more civil to ourselves. So civility implies relationship with others. And the pinnacle of our relationship with others is when we are altruistic, when we literally are not self-serving, and when we try to work on the level with others, where we try to make it so that there's no real disparity, and therefore there will be, in fact, greater cooperation and harmony with everything we do. And yet, it is the consensus of thinking people that we live in a time of incivility, as evidenced by social disparities, large economic chasms, and political divides. If, according to the teachings of the Buddha, we are basically good, which is what is part of the definition that I use for civility, how did we get here? Now, I want you to understand that we haven't gotten here like this is the first time. What we're experiencing right now is the first time this has been going on. Sickness, poverty, and warfare have been going on since time immemorial. But over time, there have been religious models, economic models, social models, political models to try and balance this situation, to try and make it so that we live in a more equitable world, living in a state of being basically good and therefore more civil to each other. This is reflected in some Buddhist prayers. There's what are called the Four Immeasurables, where it says, "May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness." The causes of happiness basically are to essentially understand reality and to live a life where we are not necessarily just self-serving and not really paying attention to what serves us on the mental, emotional, and spiritual levels, as well as our bodily levels. May all beings be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. That's the second immeasurable. And this really has to do with basically just, again, paying attention and not doing the things that basically all of us know don't work. I have a saying that I use quite frequently, which says we all know what's going on. We just agree not to blow each other's cover. So essentially, we know what keeps us free from suffering. And yet, we like to hedge our bets and do various things, and we end up in a whole lot of difficulties. And the idea in any kind of model that tries to improve that situation is to make it so it's an ongoing reality. May people not be separated from the great happiness that is devoid of suffering, which means, can we literally be willing to pay attention, to not do the things that we know cause harm, and to do that in a more sustained way? And this is where I think of the cardinal virtue of fortitude, where it takes great strength to learn how to persist. And you think about the time we're in right now, where what's going on is all of the habit patterns, all the things that we're used to are literally not how we are finding ourselves in the time and space we are in. And finally, the fourth immeasurable is may all live in great equanimity, free from passion, aggression, and prejudice. So can we all live on the level where we are not basically self-serving, where we are not being aggressive towards each other, where we're not being prejudicial in one way or another? Now these last 3 points, free from ignorance, attachment, and aggression, basically, are what in the Buddhist tradition are known as the 3 poisons. In Scottish Rite Freemasonry, we talk about the transformation on a societal level of ignorance, fanaticism, and tyranny. And these are basically the social constructs around the same 3 poisons that Buddhism talks about. So in that way, what you could say is George Washington, was aware of these, although he may not have known that there were these Buddhist ideas in terms of ignorance, attachment, and aggression. And the idea is that in holding to that prayer, these 4 immeasurable prayers, the idea is that if we do that, if we hold to that aspiration and strive to bring it into a reality, then we would live in a truly civil society. That society would in fact be an enlightened society. And the question you may ask yourself is this possible? When we look at the history that we're most familiar with, we might not think that it's possible. But what if in fact this is really what's going on in the background? That sounds like a strange idea, but I want to share with you a story that was told by Robert Thurman, great Buddhist teacher, and I think a pretty nice guy. I've interviewed him for my book, The Wisdom of the Buddhist Masters, Common Sense. And in the Vimalakirti Sutra, he talks about that when the Buddha was enlightened, what happens is the world, the universe, becomes a Buddhaverse. There is a harmonic convergence. And you can think of that harmonic convergence with respect to what happens, for example, if you're sitting in a room and you're sitting very calm and very peacefully, and your cat comes and sits on your lap, or your children become quiet and just want to be still next to you. If you've been around any very powerful spiritual masters, oftentimes that's the kind of air that they create around them. And so what it is said is that the Buddha had this air around him, and this attracted a lot of beings from many, many, many universes. So bear with me, we're talking about maybe what you may think as mythic history, but let's just ride with it for a while. So what happens is that all these beings come to look at the realm of the Buddha, this Buddhaverse, and they look around and they see sickness, they see poverty, they see warfare, they see people having difficult circumstances, and they turn to the Buddha and they say, this isn't an enlightened realm, this kind of sucks. You know, what are you talking about, this being a Buddhaverse or an enlightened realm? And the Buddha said, this is the realm that we see when we're caught in ignorance, attachment, and aggression, which is basically the illusion of separation from our natural world, from our basic goodness, from our innate potentials. And then he did what was called the earth witness gesture, which means he put his hand on the ground. And it is said that the land turned into gold and everything was shining and all the beings were bright and awake. And he said, this is actually how it is. He said, until we transform our minds, and he took his hand off the ground, he said, this is how it's going to look. Now, why do I bring this up in relation to civility? There are many strategies that have to do with better behavior, learning how to communicate with each other on the level. They are constructs that we have that really are, I would say, enlightened constructs. People have seen that when we are more civil, things get done. We actually end up being happier when we live in that state of civility with everyone around us. But how do we make it so that in our uncivil minds, in our time when we have prejudices, when we basically hold on to our own opinions and we're attached, how do you begin to transform that? And to me, what's very important in that is to do some kind of contemplative practice, something that begins to change that. Of course, what I would say is that, and this is what we see all the time, there are always very, very brilliant teachings around. There are great religious models, great economic models, great political models, great economic models, okay, in order to change our behavior and habits so that everybody can get what they need in a state of happiness and peace. It is there, and yet what seems to be the case, that because of ignorance, attachment, and aggression, we have greed, we have power mongering, we have all sorts of things that we do that make it not possible. And oftentimes when there is a move or a shift to something that is more civil and more possible in terms of creating equity and equanimity, that what we see is that some kind of disaster happens. Well, welcome to COVID-19. Welcome to what's happening in terms of the political atmospheres all over the planet. So, this is the realm we find ourselves in. The disaster gives us an opening. Disaster wakes us up. We can reflect on teachings. We can have a cup of coffee, a cigarette, a Chardonnay, whatever we want, and discuss philosophically all these noble ideas in terms of what it's like to be civil and talk about these things. But how do we begin to transform our minds? And that really is the important key that needs to be part of the path of civility, which is why I pair together George Washington's rules and some of the teachings, the reflective meditative perceptions and practices of the Buddha. So today I want to share with you a very, very simple exercise. And this exercise I would encourage you to do when you wake up in the morning and you want to meditate, or you want to clear your mind, you want to get it so that you're more focused. Or at the end of the day, when you've just gone through and you've been watching the news and you're getting all disgruntled and you know that if you go to sleep in this particular state of mind, you're just not going to rest well, okay? This is an exercise that is related to the yoga of breath, the teachings of the Buddha on the breath, which is found, you're beginning to see, there's a wonderful book on breath that's out right now that everybody's talking about at this point, okay, about breathing, okay? Breathing, the subtle aspect of breathing is what in Ayurveda is called prana, in Chinese medicine is called qi. And when you do an exercise to regulate that subtle life force through your breathing, you begin to calm down your mind, you begin to create more space, you begin to transform these three poisons of ignorance, attachment, and aggression. So, this very simple exercise. What I want you to imagine, and what I'd say is, you can sit back in your chair, Don't write anything down right now. Just do this exercise. I want to tell you this exercise is going to be on my most recent blog. So if you really want to write it down and practice it, you'll be able to find it there. Or you can repeat watching this podcast again and again and again. So what I want you to imagine is that there are 3 subtle channels. These are the channels that are known, connected to what in the East are known as chakras. And I want you to imagine, okay, and this is the power of our imagination. I want you to imagine that there are these 3 energy channels. There's one that starts on your right nostril, the side of your right nostril, and it is the thickness of your little finger. It is red in color. It goes, on the left side, which is where I am, is a white channel. That white channel goes from the side of the nose up underneath the skull along the side of your spine, and it finishes about 3 or 4 finger widths below your belly button. And that white channel, the thickness of your little finger, is like an energy tube, is associated with anger and frustration and aggression. On the right side, you have a tube that is red. That red tube goes up the side, underneath the skull, down the side of your spine, on the right side, about 3-4 finger widths below your belly button. And that right one, the thickness of your little finger, energy tube, not like Teflon or copper or anything like that, but just energy, is associated with attachment, holding on to things. And anterior to your spine, you've got 2 little fingers. And these little fingers, that's the thickness of the center channel. And it goes up anterior to your spine. It's dark blue in color, goes to the very crown of your head, and then hooks in towards your brain. And that one is associated with confusion or ignorance. So we have red, white, and blue. It's very patriotic. But somehow in the yogic tradition, they understand these colors are very powerful and they're useful for visualizing. So right now what I want you to imagine is that the right red tube is inserted into the bottom of the white tube underneath your belly button. So it's like one is inserted into the other below your navel. Okay? And what I want you to do now is I want you to block your right nostril and breathe in pure fresh air through that left nostril. Pure fresh air is going all the way down that white energy tube. And then you release the pressure on the right side, block the left, and breathe out from that red side. And as you breathe out on that red side, you imagine that you're pushing out like smoke and soot and things and feelings associated with attachment. You then block your right side, breathe in through your left, pure fresh air, down below your navel. You block your left, open your right, breathe out through that right side, and it's coming out and releasing attachment. You then block your right, open your left, breathe in, down below your navel, block your left, open your right, breathe out, attachment, and then you relax your hands for 3 breaths. So you breathe in and out, and you imagine that that right red side is like a radiant ruby channel, free from attachments or having attachments lessened. So it's very fluid and dynamic on that right side. After 3 breaths, you then take and imagine that the left white channel is inserted into the bottom of the red channel. And this time what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in through the right side, pure fresh air going all the way down. You're then going to block your right side and breathe out. You're going to breathe out, and you're breathing out anger and frustration and hostility as you breathe out through that left side. And you're just letting it compost back into nature. You block the left, open the right, breathe in, pure fresh air all the way down below the navel. Block the right, open the left, breathe out. Again. Block the left, open the right. Breathe in. Block the right, open left, breathe out. And now imagine that that left white side is more like a radiant diamond, just shimmering, and you're more free of any aggressive feelings. And you breathe in and out like that 3 times. After doing that, 3 in and out breaths, being aware of those 2 channels, the ruby red on the right, the diamond on the left, you want to imagine that both those channels are inserted into this tube that's below your belly button. And you're going to, excuse me for bumping my microphone, you're going to place your hands like this. I'm going to stand up for a moment so that you see like you're placing your hands right here. Can you see it? All right. Stay up a little bit more. All right. So what's going to happen is you can see these hands where there's a pointing, the thumbs are pointing towards the chin, and your hands are together. Now, what I want you to do is breathe in through both sides. Pure fresh air through both sides, all the way down into your belly, and then as you breathe out, you're breathing in, or you're breathing out, this confusion goes to the top of your head and then is pouring out from the middle of your forehead. You breathe in again, pure fresh air. You breathe out and you let go of feelings of confusion. One more time. You breathe in, pure fresh air below your belly. As you breathe out, it goes up and up and up to the crown of your head and then just pours out from your forehead. And you imagine that that blue channel is now like a radiant, deep blue sapphire. And that's what you want to pay attention to. And then you pay attention to all 3 channels for a few more moments. And then after you've done that, you may want to do some meditation, or you may want to do some kind of exercise. Or, because of the fact that your mind is more clear, you're able to go to bed more easily. But I want you to think about the idea that any kind of meditation you do has the goal of creating a more civil, peaceful, and harmonious state of being and ability to communicate. And it is accomplished through focusing on really being aware of, what do I hold on to? What are my prejudices, so to speak? How do I get attached to those things? Why am I attached to this or that? And how much aggression am I going through in my mind as I look at things? We all basically have an issue with reality. We don't understand it very well. We get attached to our particular views, and we get irritated when people disagree with us. Welcome to the 3 poisons on a personal level and a social level. And the goal is to transform those, and then the connection between you and your world is the civility that you create that makes it possible for you to make it so that you can cooperate and work with others in the most beneficial way. So that is my presentation for today. Like I said, if you're interested in this exercise, you'll find it on my blog at my website, thepathofcivility.com. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.